every dollar of debt that you have is a piece of your future that somebody else owns. On the flip side of that, every dollar of savings that you have is a piece of your future that you own.
How do you know when to rent versus buy, whether it's a house, whether it's a car? What's your take on it?
We've all done that. I've done that too. Once my net worth is X, all my problems will go away. And then you get there and you're like, I don't feel any different whatsoever.
What is a tariff and who pays for it and who is affected by it the most?
So where does someone start if they say, I don't know anything about money and I want to improve my finances?
I think the ultimate financial goal for everybody should be
Oldish. The art of knowing more and caring less. With your host, Randy Spelling, Brian Austin Green, and Sharna Burgess.
Hey Oldish fam, welcome back to another episode. We are so excited to have you guys here today for a subject that truly affects all of us. We are going to get into the subject of money. And let me first start to say that if you're a person where the word economy makes your brain scramble, me too, this episode is still for you. We have an incredible guest on today, Morgan Housel, who has an amazing way of humanizing the subject of money and making it really digestible for you to be able to understand what he's saying and understand how you can even move forward in your own life with it. So we're going to get into some amazing questions. Morgan, thank you so much and welcome to Oldish.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
We are in a crazy time, and I think the economy is really confusing for a lot of people right now.
Just understanding it doesn't make any, everyone's kind of all over the fence trying to figure out what means what. So,
and as you said, just before we started recording, more and more people are paying attention to it right now and trying to understand it through either fear or trying to make the most of it. What is your piece of advice with seeing explosive news media headlines? What is something that you want to tell people across the board to actually look for in today's news and money?
Well, I think if you're trying to make sense of the global economy or your personal finances, the first thing you need to do is stop pretending that it's a machine that works with like well-established, understandable, rational rules, because it's not. If I asked you, how does your iPhone work? Most people have absolutely no idea. They don't know how the guts inside of it work. And the global economy is just like that. Like, it's very complicated, but you add on this other layer, which is human emotions. And so imagine the complexity of your iPhone, but now it has hormones and feelings, and it's trying to gain social status. And like, it's just so much more complicated than we want to make it seem. And so whenever people are trying to make sense of the economy or the personal finances, they're like, find me an expert and have that expert tell me what's happening and what's going to happen next. And the
tell
truth
me
is,
what to do.
And tell me what to do. And the truth is, those people don't exist. It doesn't happen. It's through no fault of their own. But the global economy is such like a wild, crazy living beast. And it's all just the influence of 8 billion people waking up every morning and making decisions with their money, some of which are good, some of which are terrible, a lot of which they'll end up regretting. And the global economy is just like that big mix hitting at the same time and people trying to make sense of it. And so from a practical point of view, with your own money, your own job in the US economy, stop trying to ask what's going to happen next and start taking a longer term view of like, how do people think? How do people think about greed and risk and fear and jealousy and envy? Because that's how you start making better sense of the economy. If you're looking at it like it's a machine and you're asking for rules and laws, it just doesn't work that way. If you're trying to understand human behavior, you can make a much better sense of what's going on.
So it's about like within markets and all of that, trying to figure out sort of how it plays out in general, what people react to, what they don't. So you're taking a much broader approach to looking at the whole thing and making choices than trying to make snap calls in the moment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, here's one easy example of what I'm trying to describe. If someone was talking about the housing market, which a lot of people pay attention to and they want to understand what's going on in housing, when should I buy a house? Don't look at it through the lens of like interest rates and housing construction. Even if there's some value to that, if you're into that kind of stuff, you want to look at it through the lens of keeping up with the Joneses. That's how you understand the housing market. Why is housing so expensive? Why are people spending buckets of money on shitty homes and going into tons of debt? you can't understand that if you're thinking it through the lens of an economics textbook. But if you understand keeping up with the Joneses and wanting to buy a house that's bigger than your brother-in-law's and being jealous of your neighbor's backyard, then you totally understand what's going on. So that's one aspect of it. And it's the same, like if you're trying to understand, like, why do people go into so much debt? Why do they have so much credit card debt? Don't they know that's going to screw them over? And they're buried now. They have to work for years to get out of it. If you look at it through the lens of social media and keeping up with them, and everyone on social media has, is prettier and happier and going on better vacations than you are, and you understand what that does to people's fear of missing out, their FOMO of like, I need some of that, then you start to make sense of why people do crazy things with their money. And you can't explain any of that with a spreadsheet or an economics textbook. If you take an economics class in college, they won't touch on that whatsoever. It's all just human behavior. And I think that's like the most important part of understanding how money works and what's going on in the economy.
So 2 questions here. Number 1, how do you know that you're keeping up with the Joneses? And number 2, because people ask this all the time, how do you know when to rent versus buy, whether it's a house, whether it's a car? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so for the first question, you will never keep up with the Joneses. Nobody ever will. And part of this is because there's this great quote from the philosopher Schopenhauer. He said this hundreds of years ago. He said, if you only want to be happy, that's very easy to achieve. But most people want to be happier than other people. And that is much more difficult because we overestimate how happy they are. So if I'm looking at my neighbor and I'm like, man, he's living a better life than me, and that makes me envious and I want some of that. I'm getting a very false sense of their life because I can see their house, I can see their car, I can see their clothes and their jewelry. I can't see the quality of their marriage or their health or their own doubts and uncertainties. And so it's easy to look at other people's material possessions and be like, I want some of that because they're happier than I am. They have a faster car and a bigger house than I do. And you can't get a good sense of what that person's life is actually like. So one of the stats that I've used before is among the top 10 richest men in the world, there are a cumulative 15 divorces among the top 10 richest people. And look, that's like a very small sample size, but for a group of people who is so universally envied, there's an aspect of their personal lives that has been less than great. And so it's easy to look at Bill Gates' plane and Jeff Bezos' yacht and be like, man, if I had that, I would be so happy. And maybe there is some truth to that, but there's so much more going on in their life that you can't see. And once you get the full picture of what's going on, you realize like the futility of keeping up with the Joneses. If you lie to yourself and say, if I had a bigger house, I would be happier, then that's an easy game to play. But it's so much more difficult once you're like, look, a lot of times the reason that person has that fast car and that nice jewelry is because they've devoted their entire life 24 hours a day to their job that they don't even enjoy. And that it's taken away from time with their children and their spouse, and they're alcoholics on their 5th divorce, and like go on down the list, whatever it might be. And since we don't have a good view of what people's life is actually like, it makes it so much easier to fall into this trap of false envy, of thinking that you would be happier if you had what they had.
So incredibly true. This brings me to why your book, The Psychology of Money, is the next one that I need to read. And that's big because I like to read romantasy novels.
Romantasy?
Yeah, it's fantasy romance. But this is why I'm so excited about reading yours, because the way you talk about money and the psychology of it, that makes sense to me. Like I can understand that language of, find gratitude, right? That's a big one for me. Find gratitude for what you have instead of the grass is greener and looking at it that way. And I've heard you say this before, if you have $1 billion, you could be rich, but if you wanted 1.1, then you're poor. Right. It's the psychology of that money. And so I find that really easy to grasp onto, and I can't wait to read your book because of that. What made you write that book, The Psychology of Money? How did you grow up with this very easy understanding of money, and were you always like this?
Well, first, on your last point about how it's all relative, there's a great joke from Chris Rock where he said, if Bill Gates woke up with Oprah's money, he'd jump out the window. And I think that's really true of just like how relative everything is. And, there are, if you are a pro basketball player in the NBA and you make $1 million a year, by any measure, $1 million a year is a lot of money. You are in the tippity top 1% of anybody. But nobody making $1 million a year in the NBA feels like they're crushing it because everyone else on the team is making 15, 20, 25 million. So it's always relative. But to answer your question about like how I got into this, I started as a financial writer in 2008. It was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a hedge fund manager or an investment banker, but 2008, the economy was a wreck and nobody was hiring. And so just out of desperation, I took a job as a writer and didn't want to do it, didn't like it. But it was an interesting time to be writing about the global economy because everyone was broke and the stock market was down 50% and housing was crumbling. And so there was a lot going on. And the first couple of years, I just took the traditional route of like, I'm going to write about what the stock market did yesterday. And like, oh, the Dow Jones went up 2%. And like, but it's boring for everybody. There's not really any interest in that. But I started realizing that if I told stories about how people just behaved with money, not advice on what you should do next, but here's a story about envy and here's a story about greed. If you took it through a psychology lens and you told a story rather than through a numbers lens with a lecture, like the former was a way more powerful way to think and to communicate. Yeah. And I think that's true for anything. I think politics, sports, science, medicine, if you talk about it through psychology and storytelling, like boom, you can get people's attention. And not only can you get their attention, you're closer to the truth of understanding what's going on. Because to state again what I said at the beginning of this, we are not machines. We're not just like rational creatures. We're all just emotional, hormonal, biased people trying to make it through the day. And so if you told a story about how people were flawed in their psychology of money, it was way more interesting and closer to the truth than pretending that we were all rational beings making like clean decisions with our money. And so it was just a slow progression into that of just spending years trying to observe how and why people make decisions with money, including myself and my wife. And like, why are we doing the things that we do? There's usually a story behind that. And I think that's true for everybody. And the stories are usually innocent. Like most people are just they're just products of what they've experienced in life. Most of those experiences were out of their control. It's just where you were born, when you were born, whom you were born to, all these experiences that shaped who you are, that shape your experience with money. So I started reflecting on my own life and other people's lives and just kind of tried to tell stories about what people are doing. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a hedge fund manager. I'm just trying to sit back and observe what people do and tell an interesting story about it.
How interesting. I have to ask, do you think in your observation of people and finding these stories that if one is bad with money, can they get better at it?
I think the vast majority of the time, the unfortunate answer is no. And not all the time, but I think health is a pretty good analogy here, where if someone is morbidly obese, is it possible for them to become one day skinny and in great shape? Yes, it's possible. It's unlikely though. And I think that's true for money as well. And yes, in health, there are stories of people who did completely turn their life around, and it's same with money. But most of the time, I think on the nature-nurture spectrum of money, of like how much it can be taught versus how much is just how your brain was wired, it leans pretty heavily on the nature side, that some people are just wired for it differently than others. And I believe in financial education because there is a lot that we can teach. And a lot of people, if you just give them basic financial advice that seems so obvious maybe to you and I, but they might be like, oh, that just completely changed everything I think. You can really help people. And so it's not that it can't be taught, but I think a lot is how gullible you are to marketing, how influenced you are by social media, how your ability to take a long-term mindset and those kind of things. And so a lot of it, and the other like very important part of this is that a financial plan, like financial advice that is good for me might be really bad for you. Even if we are like the same age one, because everybody's different, like different cultures, different families, different spouses, different goals and whatnot. There are a lot of people who like their definition of a failed life is dying rich. And there's a lot of people who's like their best life would be dying rich and leaving it all to their kids. So there's no one right answer on how to do this. And maybe back to the health analogy of like, some people want to be massive bodybuilders, and to other people that's like absolutely, I would never in a million years want to look like that. Like it's similar, like there's no one right answer, and people just have to figure it out for themselves. That also, because there's no one right answer, this would be so easy if I could just say, here's what everybody should do, go do it. But it's not. Everyone's so unique in their aspirations and their abilities that it's a very individualistic process, and you just have to figure out what works best for you.
If there was a switch that could be flipped psychologically? There's one thing you could say to someone, they come to you and they say, I'm bad with money. I'm not good with money. But what would help my psychology, my mindset around it to become happier, at least, so I'm not thinking about money all day, every day, and feeling so anxious and stressed and behind the curve?
I think probably the biggest, it doesn't solve everything, but this is one of the biggest, is nobody is thinking about you as much as you are. Nobody cares about your house or your car or your clothes or your jewelry or your vacations as much as you do. No one's thinking about it because they're busy worrying about themselves. And so much modern spending is trying to show off. And even if you don't think of it like that, you're not trying to show off, but you're trying to perform for other people. And a lot of those people who you're trying to perform for are strangers, and they're not paying any attention to you whatsoever because they're busy worrying about themselves. I had this realization. It was in Los Angeles. I was a valet at a 5-star hotel in college in LA. And it was such a cool job for a 19-year-old because I was driving Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Bentleys. And I realized one day that if somebody drove into the hotel in a Lamborghini, I would stop and gawk. I would stare, but I would never stare at the driver. I never looked at the driver and said, wow, that guy's so cool. What I did is I looked at the car and I thought, if I was the driver, people would think I'm cool. People would stop and stare at me. And then it was like, don't you see the irony? Like, I never think about the driver, but I want to be the driver because I assume people will think about me. And it was like, no, nobody's thinking about you. And so if you're driving down the road in a Lamborghini, people are staring, but they're not staring at you. They're imagining themselves being you. And I think the same is true for homes and jewelry. If someone looks at a giant diamond ring, they're not impressed with you. They imagine themselves having that ring. They're thinking about themselves. Like, everyone is so innocently selfish in that way. And once you, I think, grasp that.
He just stares over at me. Sorry, Brian just gives me a sideways glance.
I know.
Where he knows that I want a rock that you can see from space.
Oh, yeah. She likes all the shiny things.
I do. Look, I'm hearing myself in everything you're saying.
Right.
But so much of this, I am not one of the people who says like, oh, and therefore you should live like a monk. Go live in a cardboard box because nobody cares. I like nice things. I like nice homes and nice cars as much as anybody. But once you realize that you don't get the social status boost that you think you do because nobody's paying attention to it, then it's really important. You can also flip this and say, well, who is paying attention? It's usually a very small list. So in my life, I desperately care about the attention from my wife, my kids, my parents, and probably like 2 friends, maybe 3 friends. And that's it. I really want their love and affection, and it means the world to me. And then after that, the list like collapses. And so I would love to spend money on things that make it easier for me to spend quality time with my wife and kids. A nice house is part of that. But you don't care about my house. You don't seem like nobody's paying attention. And I think once you take that to heart, your desire to show off with money plunges. And you don't turn into like a frugal monk, but you're like, how can I use money in a way that's actually going to make me happier, to make my life better with these 7 people who I actually care about?
It's interesting so that's honestly a place that I've been in over the past like 3 or 4 years. Like, I've really gotten into a place of, what do I want my money to accomplish for myself and my family? Like, it's not about showing off so much with the things. It's about, to me, looking at bank accounts and looking at things and being happy with like, oh, stuff is growing and it's doing well. So we're going to be able to go on vacation. We're going to be able to have all these fun things.
Right. And something Morgan talks about too is the goalposts moving, that you have this goal, this figure, right? When I get to 500,000, when I get to 1 million, when I get to 10 million, and then the goalpost
It's like
keeps
he said,
moving.
Bill Gates' worst day would be to wake up with Oprah's money.
Right.
Like, but that makes total, absolute sense. Yeah.
And something that I think is true, this is not universal either, but this is not black and white, but I think this is true for a lot of people, that your desire to have the yellow Lamborghini, just using that as a stock example, your desire to show off your money is because it's your last remaining lever to get people's attention. And what I mean by that is, like, if your spouse loves you and your kids admire you and your parents are proud of you and you have a great group of friends who are supportive and really admire you, then you're like, most of those people don't wake up every morning saying, how can I buy the flashiest, loudest car that I can get? Because like they're already fulfilled with other kind of like good attention. And so if you can't get good, genuine attention from the people that you love, you're probably going to seek it. You're probably going to seek fake material attention to try to. It's your like last remaining way to get people's attention. That's not always true, but I think it tends to be that most people who wake up truly loved and fulfilled, they love their job, they're proud of their work, don't wake up saying, how can I get a bunch of strangers' attention now?
Yeah, I totally get that. I can even see that in my own life when I've been fulfilled in what I'm doing and when I've had moments where, or periods of my life where I haven't felt so fulfilled and feeling a little lost. Retail therapy, massive spending, going on this trip, going and doing that, like trying to fill a hole with things that I could buy. And it genuinely never has.
Right. How many Amazon boxes need to show up at my front door for me to feel great that day?
We have 4 kids. There's lots of Amazon boxes, but
until you look at your accounts and you go, God, did I really need 2 different toasters? And
right. But this is a really interesting point, and hopefully you could speak to this. So let's say, I'm someone who I get fixated on things, right? Whatever's going on in my life, it's the toaster, and I research the toaster, and we could do 4 slices of bread and it'll make it more efficient, or it becomes the house. And if I have the house that's in this location or by the water, and we could do X, Y, and Z, and you become fixated on these things that will hopefully then make you feel a certain way. Sometimes I'm sure that is the case, but a lot of times it's empty and it doesn't fulfill what we're really looking for. So how do we break that cycle?
I think what's true is that if you tell yourself, oh, if I had the bigger house, I would be happy. Oh, if I went on this vacation, I'd be happy. If I had this car, I would be happier. What you're actually telling yourself, what you're actually imagining is yourself being content with those things. So when I say like, oh, if I was on the beach in Maui with my kids right now, I would be so much happier. What I'm actually feeling when I say that is being on the beach in Maui and being totally content with what I have at that point. But most people in those situations are not. They get to Hawaii and rather than enjoying time with their kids and being content, they're worrying about paying for trip. They're worrying about the email that they got from their boss. They get sunscreen in their eye. Like they're thinking about other things. Or if you imagine yourself and say, if I had that house on the water, I would be so much happier. When you envision that happiness, you imagine yourself sitting at that house and being totally content with it. But in reality, when you get that house, you're probably looking at your neighbor and you're like, oh, their view's a little bit better than mine. And all of a sudden you're not content anymore. So like what we aspire to, I think, when we actually like, oh, I can dream about a life in which I'm happier. It's not necessarily happiness. What you're dreaming about is contentment. You're dreaming about just being in a situation where you're like, I'm good. I don't need anything else than I have right now. And so I think when we tell ourselves those stories about if I had this fancy toaster, my life would be so much better. Like once you get it, there's probably another toaster that does 5 slices, that you're going to be thinking about. And all of us have dealt with that.
There's a toaster that does 5 slices.
5 slices.
You're kidding me.
But odd numbers, weird.
We've all done that. I've done that too at various points in my life. Once my net worth is X, all my problems will go away. And then you get there and you're like, I don't feel any different whatsoever. And you're just dreaming about X plus 2, X plus 3. Everyone's always dealt with that. And it's because we're not content with what we have. I should say too, like the fact that most people wake up in the morning not content with their life is the driver of progress. That's like the fact that most people wake up and they're like, I can do better. I need to go invent a new product or be more efficient. That's why the economy is better and richer. And we have amazing technology now we do, because most people wake up in the morning feeling a little bit inadequate, which is a good thing, but it makes it so that we never, it never feels as good as we think it's going to when we buy new stuff, because we don't have the contentment that we're dreaming about. We're always just aspiring for what's next.
And I think some people feel inadequate, and maybe that's the driver of progress. And then there's a lot of people that just feel awful, that feel frozen, that feel overwhelmed. So if someone is in that space where they just feel horrible about their situation and they're glitching over and over, I can't get out of this, I can't get out of this, where does one start?
There's a lot of evidence in behavioral finance that if you are already a happy person, that having more money will make you happier. But if you're already depressed, you're already sad, you're already kind of angry and bitter, then having more money won't do anything for you whatsoever. So it's usually just like a magnifier on who you already are. And I think what's really true too is that if you don't have a strong sense about what's going to make you happier in life, it's very easy to default to, well, if I had more money, then I would be happier. It's so easy to default to because it's easy to quantify. So if I said I would be happier if I was a 10% better dad, what does that even mean? How do you quantify 10% better dad? I'm like, nobody knows what to do with it, but it's very easy to quantify 10% higher net worth. You can easily put a figure on that, and then you can have a goal that you can chase. So we chase money because it's so easy to measure. Even if we know like health, family, sleep and whatnot, like that's actually going to make you happier. It's just so much more nebulous. It's harder to chase than just making it very easy and say, I need an extra $1 million. That's such an easy goal to go after. So I think like the path of least resistance is always, if I had more money, my life would be better. Even if like we know that money can make you happier, but not if you're already miserable. And it's only going to make you happier if you're using it as a tool to leverage things that bring like legitimate happiness, which is family, friends, health, those kind of things. If you're just using it as a yardstick of social status, you're never going to win that game. And you're always going to be disappointed by how meager the happiness boost you get at every level that you're trying to climb.
Right, because you started looking for happiness in the wrong place to begin with. Like you gain wealth because you think, oh, that'll make me happy, because you haven't done the work to make yourself happier without it. So then you continue to chase and just, want more and more and more, but it doesn't ever fill that hole because you didn't even start in the right place of filling that hole emotionally.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of anxiety and the way people are feeling, a lot of people in this country right now have debt, massive credit card debt, student loan debt, and it is scary and it is depressing or it creates anxiety. What are some steps that these people can take toward feeling better about it instead of getting stuck in that hole? Like you're talking about this mental health side of it, really, right? Feeling better about yourself and your life. How do you do that when you have a massive amount of debt? And we're in a space right now where it feels like, how am I ever going to get out of that?
Yeah, there's no easy answers to it. I mean, back to the like health being the closest analogy to money. If someone is very obese and wants to lose weight, there's no other answer other than diet and exercise. Except maybe now we have Ozempic. That's different. But there's no easy answers to it.
Right? Is there an Ozempic for money? That would be fantastic.
Well, yes, it's called bankruptcy. that's the easiest way to do it.
Got it. Okay.
But no, I mean for most people, there's no easy answer to this other than you're going to have to reduce your lifestyle and pay it back. Psychologically, the way to think about debt is, well, first, I think the ultimate financial goal for everybody should be independence. That's the greatest tool that money can provide you, is independence in your life, so that you can wake up every morning and do whatever you want with whomever you want for as long as you want. You're just taking control over your life. Every dollar of debt that you have is a piece of your future that somebody else owns. It's a piece of your future that you're like, 2 years from now, I need to go to work to pay off the bank. Like, they own your future now. And on the flip side of that, every dollar of savings that you have is a piece of your future that you own. It's just like, it's delayed gratification that you own there. And I think if you always think about that, you become much more wary of debt to begin with. You're like, look, the ultimate goal is independence, and every dollar of debt that I have is a piece of time in the future owned by a faceless banker who doesn't give a shit about me. That's always been my view, and just scares the crap. I'm very anti-debt in my own life.
Yeah.
Just because all I want out of money is independence. I just want to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today.
Be financially retired. That's a goal for me for sure. I want to pay off my home. I want to own it completely, so I don't have to ever worry about like a mortgage payment and any of that stuff again. And I want to know that financially, I'm good. Like, I don't have to stress about finances anymore. I can do the other things in my life that bring me joy, with my family, with my kids, with us.
Mm-hmm. I think there's two things that make
that's the worst. Ugh.
And there's two things that make it very difficult to manage. One is that people always underestimate how fragile their life is going to be, and their own career. So if you said, what are the odds that at least one of these will happen to all of us, all four of us, over the next 20 years? Massive career change or job loss, major health crisis, divorce, wayward children, going down the list of something like that. What are the odds that at least one of those will happen to all of us? And the answer is 100%. That like one of those happens to everybody. And a lot of people, all of them, they'll get hit by all of those things. And so it's easy to underestimate how fragile all of our lives are. And because of that, if you're burying yourself in debt where you're like when you go into debt, what you're saying is, I know what my income is going to be next year and the year after that and the year after that. And the answer is like, no, you don't. You have no idea how much money you're going to be making 5 years from now. It might be more, it might be a lot less. And so, but it's hard to wake up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror if you're actually honest about how fragile everyone's life can be and your own life can be. And so that's what makes debt difficult, is like, debt would be great if everyone had a very clear view of what the next 10 years of their life is going to be, but nobody does.
Isn't there a certain quality though, a certain positive side to like, oh, I'm betting on myself and I'm betting that I'm going to stay afloat over these next couple of years. So
like investing in yourself?
Right. So making these purchases and stuff, I'll be okay. I mean, isn't there, can't you find a positive in that? Or is it just sort of a stupid, road to go down?
No, I definitely understand what you're saying. And I think this is where everybody is different and there's no one size fits all answer. Makes sense. I think debt is not a drug. It can be misused, but it's not financial heroin. There's a lot of use cases for debt that's like, no, that's a great thing. If you're going into a modest amount of debt to get a college degree from a good university that's going to set up your career, like, awesome, that's great. Mortgage debt is usually pretty cheap. It's government subsidized. Its interest is tax deductible most of the time. Like, it's not bad but like anything else, you can overdo it. And a lot of people do. A lot of people do completely overdo it. And they assume, particularly for like novice, like people who don't have a lot of financial education, they assume that if the bank says you can afford a $600,000 mortgage, and they're like, well, the banker told me I could, so I that must be true. The banker does not care about the rest of your life. They don't care about whether you're eating rice and beans 3 meals a day. They don't care about the stress that comes
along with it.
They don't care about how many hours you're sleeping at night, whether it's freaking you out. They don't care that you're eating rice and beans 3 meals a day. They could care less. And so you really have to, I think everyone has an obligation to learn about two topics in life, which are health and money. Because whether you like those topics are interested in you. And those topics are going to affect your life one way or another. And so I think you can go through life and have a great life without knowing anything about chemistry. You cannot have a good life if you know nothing about health and money. They're going to impact you in profound ways. And so everyone needs to figure out, like, what is debt? How much can I tolerate, both financially and psychologically? How well do I sleep at night? What freaks me out? What do I actually want? Those are not nice to have topics. That's like a moral obligation for everyone to figure out.
I love a story that I've heard you told before, if you wouldn't mind telling it again. It was the janitor, right? That died with $8 million worth of, well, not debt, sorry, with his income. He was worth $8 million. And he lived within his means. He was a janitor, but he just saved, he invested. And when his life ended, he had $8 million in his wealth. And I don't know what he did with it at the end of it, but it was so amazing when I heard that story, because it's like, oh, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or an actor or anything that earns supposedly massive amounts of money. You can be a janitor and still accumulate a massive amount of wealth if you live within or under your means and find the things that truly do make you happy, knowing that money probably won't do that. I thought that was a really fascinating story.
Yeah, his name was Ronald Reed. He's a fascinating guy. He was a complete country bumpkin, kind of raggedy person who none of us would pay any attention to. He was a gas station attendant and a janitor in Missouri, I think. And when he died, he left $8 million to charity. And people were like, "What? Where did he get all this money?" And they dug through his paperwork and his accounts, and it's like he just saved what little he could, $20 a week or whatever it was, and he invested in the stock market and he left it alone for 70 years, and that was it. And then he donated when he died. He left it all to charity in his local town. I should also say too that like he lived so ridiculously frugal. He was such a maniac about saving and investing that I'm not using him as a role model of saying you too should live in a one-room shack and wear raggedy jeans and then save everything. That's not the idea.
You only need one shirt. What do you two for? You have a washing machine, right?
Right. I'm not saying you should mimic his lifestyle, but what he proved is that you don't need to be a Harvard-educated Goldman Sachs partner, hedge fund manager on Wall Street to make a lot of money. You just need the right psychology. He had no education whatsoever. I don't even think he finished high school. but he had the right psychology. He was able to live within his own means. He didn't give a shit about what anyone else thought about him. He was able to invest for 70 years with just leaving it alone, just letting his money compound. And if you can do that, that's it. That's all you need in order to do well financially. And so the idea that like, I don't understand finance, it's too complicated, and like the wizards on Wall Street are like, I think that's all wrong. It's just like a few very basic psychological traits to do well over time that you need.
Okay, so where does someone start? I mean, this reminds me of Warren Buffett saving on not getting his hair cut because he thought compounding interest over time, it would be worth $10,000 and then that could be invested. So where does someone start if they say, I don't know anything about money and I want to improve my finances? Where do I start?
I think there's two things that I would do. I would read as much as you can about the topic. Of course, that is literally talking my own book in that situation. But the other thing that I do that I think is way more powerful is start talking to your friends and family about it. And you will realize instantly, if you open up about your finances, they will open up about theirs, because everyone has questions, everyone has emotions, everyone has doubts and uncertainties, and that they hold in because it can be, I think, embarrassing for people to want to talk about it. And if you open up to some trusted people, you will realize that they probably have the same fears and doubts that you do. And that alone can just like, it's so good to get that off your chest and to understand that other people are going through the exact same thing that you would do. The other thing, this is so basic and boring, but I'm always astounded at how important this can be for some people who are detached from their personal finances. And it's the very simple advice of check your bank account every single day. I am astounded at how many people literally have no clue at what is coming in and what is going out. Is out of sight, out of mind. They have no idea whatsoever. And if you sit people down and you say, tell me how much you spend every month, they have they couldn't get it right within tens of thousands of dollars. It's completely out of sight. And so just the simple idea of just being more aware and more cognizant of what's coming in and what's going out is the first step for a lot of people. It's the most kindergarten basic advice that you can get, but that's how detached a lot of people are. Those are three things. Like if you really feel like you're lost at sea financially, those are the three things that I would start doing. Pay more attention, read as much as you can, talk very openly and honestly with other people who are around you.
Almost like a personal profit and loss. What are you making? What's going out? Do you both know
so
what you spend and
I do.
I do now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
What you're saying is so very true for me. So I grew up with a wild relationship with money because my dad was very much a let's look like we have lots of it, but we didn't kind of human. And so I was used to the frivolous spending. And then when I started earning money, I didn't spend the way he did, but I thought I was doing a really good job, but I still had these habits of convenience. And so when I came to America and I'm on television, I'm earning TV money, which was massive amounts of money. I would get to the end of the year and I'd have zero to show for it. But I wasn't buying Louis Vuitton handbags and I wasn't buying Louboutin shoes. I thought I was being really good about it. And it wasn't until I had a business manager sit with me who was like, you need to learn about this. You need accountability. How do you not know what is happening with your money? And I saw that it was $100 at the airport and $20 for valet. And it was all these tiny little bits of money that added up to literal hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that I was blowing. When I had nothing to show for it, I had zero to show for it. Once my tax was paid, that was a wrap for me. No vacation for summer. Like it was done. And so I learned to look at my bank accounts every day, to, even though I have a business manager, approve the spending on the credit cards, make sure I'm looking for fraud, be accountable, and to go, you know what, maybe I don't need to have the large bottle of water for a plane ride that I'm probably not going to ever drink all of. You know what I mean? It was these little things that made adjustments that made the biggest difference you could ever imagine. And so now I do have a massive amount of accountability with my money and what's going in and out. And that was the biggest lesson for me. I couldn't believe I was blowing that much money. I had no idea, Morgan. No idea I was going through it all.
It's one of the greatest things with technology now. Like I'm able to on my phone kind of go in and look at all of my accounts and see what's coming in and what's going out. And I can talk to my business manager and say, hey, before things come out of this account, let me know what's going where and and it's amazing just when you have that overview of things, how much more accountable and how much more a part of the process you feel than when you didn't know that. When I was younger and I literally had no idea what was going into accounts and what was going where, you don't know until all of a sudden somebody's going, yeah, you don't really have enough to
it's
cover this.
shocking,
And it was like,
right?
whoa, wait, what do you mean I don't have enough to cover this? You know, and and then you look back at it, like you said, and all of a sudden it's the $20 here and it's the $100 there and it's the things. And we still, at this point, because we have 4 young kids at home, we still, credit card bills come in every month. And it's like, our business manager sometimes will be like, you guys need to cut back on the credit card spending a little bit. And it's like, but I have 4 young kids. And so when we're going out to eat and we're doing stuff, our dinners are for 7 of us. Like it is how do I keep those bills down, when I'm like trying to support my family and make sure that we can do. So it's difficult, but having, for me, being able to sit back and look at the accounts and see what is truly going on with everything has been a game changer for me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And as basic as that advice is, I think it's true that probably 70% of Americans have no clue what's coming in and going out. It's complete. Sure. They have a complete blindness to it. Yeah. So it sounds like such basic advice, but it's extremely powerful just because there's so much ignorance around it.
What would you say to someone who gets caught in the numbers, who checks the accounts, but then checks so much where the numbers actually can become limiting?
Yeah, it's like that's the point when money becomes such a ingrained part of your personality that it's controlling you. Like you're not using it as a tool anymore. If you're just completely obsessed with the numbers going up and you have these like fierce goals that you're trying to hit and your entire life is based around meeting your financial goals, you're not using it as a tool to live a better life. It is firmly in control of your own personality at that point. It's an obsession, if not like a full-on addiction at that point. And that's actually quite a bit of people too. Here's how I've done it in my own life for investing in the stock market, which is a small part of money, but using this as an example. I check the markets I followed markets every day for 25 years because I think it's fascinating. I think it's a fascinating window into human behavior and greed and fear. I think it's an interesting window into the world, but watching it every day does not influence how I invest. I am a very hands-off, leave it alone investor. So even though I'm paying attention to the numbers, it's not influencing my behavior. It gets dangerous when you watch the stock market every day and you're like, oh, buy this, sell that. And you're always trying to outsmart it and it's influencing your behavior. That's when it gets dangerous. So I think if like what you want to control is are decisions that you're going to end up regretting, but you can still follow the numbers every day as long as they're not influencing your behavior so much that it's in control of your own personality.
And it's a really good point in terms of metrics as a whole, because now we're in this social media era where you have kids that are obsessed with numbers and likes and metrics. And then, like you're saying, money becomes a metric that can actually make you feel worse. And I love what you said, it's a tool. Are we using the tool of money to enhance life, to do what we want to do, to actually make us happier? Or does it become this obsession where we can never gain control and we feel terrible about it?
Right. Are you watching sports because you just love football, or are you watching it to see what moves to make within your fantasy league? It's like, and then all of a sudden you take yourself out of the joy of it and it just becomes like a business side of it. And you're like, God, I've lost my love for the sport because I'm so worried about the stats of everything going on.
Totally.
Right. Morgan, I wanted to talk to you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Nope. You go.
I was winding in different ways. I wanted to talk to you because I know you said something about lowering expectations. And you said it in 2 areas. You said it's so important to lower your expectation, and also as it relates to relationships and lowering expectation. Can you talk to us about those 2?
Well, so I've used this story before about my grandmother-in-law, my wife's grandmother. She passed away a couple years ago, but I think for 30 years or more, maybe it was 40 years, she lived off of nothing but $1,800 a month in Social Security. She had no savings, no pension, she got $1,800 a month in Social Security, and that was all she lived off of for 30 or 40 years. And she was one of the happiest people you could ever meet. She was so much happier than any billionaire that I've ever met. because her expectations were so low that she had very little she had no financial wealth, but she had like extreme amounts of psychological wealth because she didn't expect anything else. She was totally happy just hanging out at home and reading and talking to her grandkids and going for a walk. That's what made her happy. Her expectations were so low that she needed nothing to make her happier. And all of us know people who are in the opposite situation where they're extremely well, by any metric, they are filthy rich, but they want more so badly that they wake up every morning just tortured at what they don't have. And one like the craziest example I've come across of this was Bernie Madoff. A lot of people know who he is. He was the biggest financial fraudster of all time. He stole $30 billion from investors in his Ponzi scheme. The craziest part of Bernie Madoff is that before his Ponzi scheme began, before he became a crook, he was earning like $25 million a year from the legitimate side of his business, his legal business, which was not a fraud. It was not a Ponzi scheme. His real business, he's making $25 million a year back in the 1980s when that was a lot of money.
And it just wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough. He was legitimately one of the most successful businessmen in the world. And I guess he woke up every morning and said, it's not enough. I need more. I need more. I need more. And he eventually got more by becoming the biggest crook of all time. And so that's an example of like, it doesn't matter how much you have. If you want more, you're going to be miserable and you're going to keep taking risks to get more until it blows up in your face. And the opposite, like the other extreme end of the spectrum was my grandmother-in-law. She had nothing, but she didn't want anything else. So she was perfectly content. And honestly, if I compare the lives of my grandmother-in-law who lived in a 700 square foot house and never did any fancy vacations, didn't own a car, if I compare her quality of life and happiness to any of the billionaires who I've met, it's not even close whose life you would actually want to live if you were thinking about this logically.
That's so fascinating.
Fascinating. And I get it.
Yeah.
I get it too. It makes total sense.
You can feel it, right? There's something inside.
It's part of what it's a part of what I was talking about when you meet people and financially they're so secure, but they literally are just by themselves because that has become their world. And you look at them and you go, God, you're missing out on so much. That's exactly what you're talking about.
Of life.
You're missing out on the things that will truly bring you happiness because you're so fixated on one thing. It just becomes your driving force in life. And it's just a horse with blinders on. You're not seeing anything else going on.
I think that's always been the case. That was true 1,000 years ago, but I think it is way more important now than ever because of social media. Because now, no matter how much money you're making, or how good you look, or how happy your kids are, or how great your marriage is, you log on to Instagram and there's someone who looks like they're doing better than you. Sure. Maybe they are. They're probably not. It's probably fake. All of us know the person on Instagram who's like posting about how great their life is, but if you actually know them, you know their life is falling apart. Everyone knows that people are just performing on social media, but it makes it so that it's easier than ever today to make a lot of money. It's easier than it's ever been in history to make a lot of money than it is today. But it's easier than ever to feel like you're falling behind. It's easier than ever to feel like you're inadequate. So if you go back to like the 1950s, which was like a very happy period in the US economy, people felt rich. People felt great back then. They were earning so much less money than we are now on average. The average American family in the 1950s earned what would be considered deep poverty today. But they didn't expect much. So the tiny house that they lived in, the little 700 square foot house where your 3 kids shared a bedroom and there was one bathroom for all of you and didn't have a garage, that felt amazing.
It was great because they had a house.
They did. Yeah. They just had a house, and they didn't expect that they ever would. They always thought they'd be living in a roach-infested apartment in Brooklyn. And now that they had a house on Long Island, even if it was an absolute dump by today's standards, they were ecstatic. They were over the moon. So that's just like where expectations comes into play. Now, I think it's possible. Like I want more money. You want more money. Of course, everybody does. This is not saying like, just be happy with everything you have now.
Right.
But you have to realize that like, if you don't put as much emphasis into managing your expectations as you do improving your circumstances, it's never going to feel like it's enough. And if it doesn't feel like it's enough, you're always going to be miserable, and you're going to keep on taking risks that you're going to keep taking more risk and more risk until it blows up in your face.
I totally see that. Okay, well, speaking of risk, then, you just said it's so much easier to make a ton of money now than it ever has been. And I could just hear everyone listening going, but how?
Right,
Where?
yeah, right.
What are these avenues that you mean? Is it educating yourself on investing? Is it like, what do you think are ways that people could educate themselves on learning how to make more money?
Well, what I mean by that in general is just because the world is so much more connected now than it's ever been, that it's much more of a winner take all kind of opportunities. This podcast or doing what I do are opportunities that did not even exist 20 years ago. And because it's winner take all, I mean, think about if this was 50 years ago and you guys were doing what you're doing now, but there was no internet back then, you would have had to go to a TV studio to try to host your show, or you could just hold like a local gathering and hope 20 people showed up to listen to you talk. And now because of this, millions of people can listen to it. And there are so many different examples of that, of just, it's easier now than it's ever been to get people's attention, to get millions of people's attention. A lot of social downsides from that, but just more opportunities because of technology and being interconnected than there's ever been. That's not to not have any empathy for the industries and careers that have obviously declined over the last many years, many decades. There's that too. But you could say this statistically just off of like the average American income adjusted for inflation is higher now than it's ever been. And also just the new opportunities of becoming massively wealthy that didn't exist even 10 years ago that do exist today.
Absolutely. I know I want to get into 3 questions that we ask everybody that comes on our show, but we would be missing a whole point if we did not ask you about tariffs. It is such a massive conversation today. And because I love the way that you explain things, we only just this week had a conversation in our dining room with family on who pays for tariffs. And there was discrepancy in it. And I know there's so much information out there. Again, there's social media, but like, what do you trust? I trust you. You're very trustworthy. You explain things beautifully. What is a tariff and who pays for it?
How does it work?
And who
Please,
is
for the people
how does
that
it
do
work?
not understand
and who is affected by it the most?
Okay, so let me answer the most important part, which is who pays the tariffs. And this is very clear, very simple. It is the U.S. company that is importing products from overseas. So let's say I sell toys in the United States. I sell dolls, and they're made in China. But I'm a U.S. company. I'm based in California, and I have my little doll shop. But these products are made in China. I put in an order. I order 1,000 dolls from China. They're shipped on a container ship. They land in Los Angeles where I can pick up the container ship. I pay the tariff once that those products enter the United States. The company in China doesn't pay it. The Chinese government doesn't pay it. I pay it as the U.S. company that's importing those products. So let's say I used to buy the doll in China for $2. It cost $2 to build this doll in China. As until this week, when the tariffs were kind of put on pause, at least most of them, let's just keep the math simple and say the tariff was 100%. If the doll costs $2 to make in China, once I pick it up at the port in California, after it's shipped from China, I would pay a $2 tariff, a $2 tax to the U.S. government to pick it up. Now, I can either eat that loss or I can pass it on to the consumer, the person who's buying the doll. And so who pays the tax is the United States. It's a tax on consumers. It's a tax on U.S. businesses. It's always been like that.
So consumers pay it to the U.S. government, basically.
Specifically, the company that is importing is the one who's actually writing a check for the bill. Now they can either eat that cost and pay it themselves, or they can pass it on to consumers. And so it's not necessarily that because of tariffs, the price at the grocery store or at the mall is going to go up. A lot of them will, but it's not one-to-one because the U.S. company can pay that themselves. They can eat the loss a little bit. But it means that that company that's importing dolls from China has less money to hire and less money to invest. It's still money out of the U.S. It's still a tax like any other tax would be. And so I think a lot of the misconception, it gets very easy to be rah-rah for tariffs if you think China pays them. You're like, yeah,
right.
like
If you
want to do business in America, like you got to pay
into our country.
No,
which is what we hear.
It's pouring into the U.S. government from you, just like a sales tax.
Right.
Like people understand sales tax. If you buy something for $100 and there's a 10% sales tax, you pay $10 to the California state government. People understand that. And a tariff is really fundamentally no different than that. It's a tax on U.S. businesses and consumers, depending on how it's passed along. But China ain't paying that. Europe ain't paying that. Brazil's not paying that. It's coming out of our pockets.
It's
That's
just
the
a
most
tax
important
that
part.
you're paying on a Chinese good or a good coming from different areas.
The other important thing to say is that there are absolutely cases when a tariff is necessary. if like we saw this firsthand during COVID, when every like medical mask was made in China and South Korea. And all of a sudden, like overnight in America, we were like, we need literally 1 billion masks today. Well, they're all imported from overseas. Like you don't want to be in a situation where if there's another deadly pandemic, we are relying on the kindness of countries that may or may not like us for these very important things. Or in the military, if we rely on China to make parts for our bombs and missiles, that's probably not a good position to be in. In those situations, it makes sense to have a tariff so that you are like highly incentivizing mass production, let's say, in the United States, so that we're not relying on other countries that we need it. But the idea that we need a tariff on socks and belts and wallets and shoes from like that's absurd. That's just a pure tax on U.S. consumers.
Or food that we can't grow here all year round.
Right. There's maybe these have been dropped. I don't know. It's changed so much recently, but there's a tax on bananas and coffee, like as if we can start growing bananas in Montana or something, that we can just like grow them in the United States. Like
I'd like to.
Wait, didn't an island with only penguins get hit with a 10% tariff?
Yeah.
Something like that? Yeah.
Yes, that too.
Or penguins.
And
their ice just got more expensive.
I was going to say, I think there's also empathy too for the idea that we, like in the United States, we used to be a manufacturing powerhouse more than we are today, particularly for manufacturing employment. We actually still make a lot of stuff in the United States now. It just doesn't require as many workers as it did in our grandparents' generation. And so a lot of people who could have gotten good, high-paying manufacturing jobs in the 1960s, those jobs by and large don't exist anymore. So I understand why there's like a social and political push to turn the ship around. But I think doing it with tariffs is probably the least logical way to do it. And to that point, most of them have already been rolled back within days of them being implemented.
Well, yeah, I've heard from a bunch of different sources the concept of like, okay, you want to bring manufacturing back into the U.S. That's great, that's fantastic. It's going to take time to do that. You can't all of a sudden put tariffs and then everybody's sitting around going, okay, well, we have nothing right now.
You have to build the infrastructure.
Right, we have nothing for the next 3 years until it's built here. Then you start getting into the problems of like lack of those resources that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If it was phased in over many years, I would still think it's a bad idea, but at least there's some logic to that. But the idea of just springing it on everybody overnight and basically saying we're at a trade embargo with China, you can't buy anything else from China anymore, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Randy, did you have any like subjects or questions you wanted to get into?
I mean, there's so many.
I know, right? I feel like I've asked so many. And
No, that's okay.
So
I think. I mean, we'll have to do this again because there's.
Oh my God,
there's a lot more that we want to get into. But let's ask the 3 questions.
The 3? Do you have them on you? Do you want to go for it?
I do.
Go for it.
All right. So we asked these to all our guests, and we're going to ask these to you. So, what is one thing that you used to care really deeply about and are now grateful that you no longer do?
Oh, it's the attention of strangers. We talked about this earlier. It's not that I want to walk around looking like a bum and I don't care what I look like. It's not that whatsoever. But I always try to think about what I said earlier of like I desperately want the love and attention of 7 people in my life, and everyone else I couldn't care. Now I think a lot of people as they get older they kind of get to that, and I think that's why the typical like crotchety grandfather who just does not care about what everyone thinks of him. Like everyone kind of gets to that point eventually. Mm-hmm. But as I look back at who I was in my early 20s of just desperate for the attention of strangers, I'm glad that I've matured and gotten rid of some of those viewpoints.
This is kind of our slogan
It's
here
Oldish.
at Oldish is the art of knowing more and caring less.
Caring less. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
What is a messy human moment for you that taught you the most?
I don't know if this taught me the most, but it was definitely as it relates to money. When my wife and I were buying our first house 10 years ago, we found this listing on Zillow and we're like, oh, looks really cool. No rash decisions. But let's go tour it just to like gather some information. But we're not buying it. We're just going to look at it. And we pulled into the driveway at this open house and my wife gasps and she goes, I love it. And I loved it too. And I realized like at that moment, the idea of like, oh, no emotions, no rash decisions. We're just like, forget about it. Of course it's emotional. Like you can't buy a house and think of it just like you're buying a washing machine. A house is emotional. You're going to raise your kids there. You're going to have Christmas morning there. You have barbecues with your friends there. So the idea that you can think about it in just pure like rational math terms, doesn't exist. It's very emotional at that point. That was a turning point for me, of being like, don't fool yourself into thinking that money is just numbers. It's all psychology and sociology. And once you think about it through that lens, like, a lot of things become much clearer.
I love that, because so often it's like, don't be emotional. And it is emotional. I mean, I don't know how to cut that off. Right.
Yeah. Human.
Totally.
That's a good point. What would you tell your younger self now that you know more and you care less?
Oh, that's good. I would see, I could take both sides of the answer that I'm going to give. I would look back and say, don't worry so much. It's all going to work out. It's not going to be easy, but it's all going to work out. I think most of us could tell our younger self some version of that story. I could also take the other side and say, the reason it worked out is because I was worried. The reason it worked out is because I lost sleep when I was age 21 thinking about this big career decision. And I lost sleep about wondering about this in my life and like big decisions. The worry is what pushes you into action. But I would still look back and say, man, like, you were so stressed and so worried and so anxious. And I wish I could tell my younger self it's all going to work out, even though it's going to be very hard and difficult. And there's going to be things that happen that you didn't want to happen. I wish you would worry a little bit less. But I could easily play devil's advocate for that as well. And I think some of the people who have the hardest lives are the people who didn't worry enough. They have very difficult lives because they were so at ease with major decisions that they look back at with a sense of regret.
That's actually a really interesting point. I'm a very easy, happy-go-lucky Aussie, but at times in my life where I'm like, no, it's fine, she'll be right. It's a very Aussie thing to say. She'll be right. She was not right. There was no right. It ended up not being right, and it created a little bit more havoc in my life than necessary. So I totally get that. I should.
It's a balance between. It's a balance between finding like the right amount of stress. You definitely don't want no stress. Like, no stress means you're just oblivious and naive, but too much stress is just, and like that feeds on itself too. It's just the right balance of worry. Yeah.
Morgan, you have 2 books out, right? You have The Psychology of Money and a new one that has come out since then.
I have 2 books out. I have The Psychology of Money and Same as Ever. And then I have a new book coming out this fall called The Art of Spending Money. It's out October 7th.
Oh,
that's
tell me
a book
about
that I need.
I need all of them. Tell me about The Art of Spending Money. What's coming up with that one?
It's not, the first thing I say is it's not called The Science of Spending Money, because I don't think that exists. There's no way that I could say, here's how you should spend to make yourself happier, because everybody's different. So it's The Art of Spending Money, because it's really a look at the psychology of spending, of envy, of jealousy, of contentment, of the psychology of like what happens inside your head when you're making big spending decisions. And like everything else I've done, I'm just trying to tell stories about people who've dealt with this. There's no lectures, or it's not dense academic theories. It's just some stories about how people dealt with greed and envy, and which I think is the most important part of spending. And too much of the spending discussion is like really dry topics of like, oh, spend it on experiences, not on things. Even if there's some truth to that, I think once you scratch the surface and get down deeper into why people spend and why they've spent money on things that they have, you get some really deep topics about envy and trust and social aspiration that it was fun to dig into and think about my own life and tell some stories about it.
Oh, I want to read that as well. That's on the list for sure.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for hanging with us today, Morgan. Please let everyone know where they can find you, your social media handles, a website, where they can get your books.
Yeah, so the books, Psychology of Money and Same as Ever, you can buy them anywhere. Most of it is Amazon these days, of course. Social media, most of where I'm at is Twitter. My handle is Morgan Housel, my first and last name.
Perfect.
Morgan, you're the man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Thanks for joining us.
You really helped us unpack a lot of things, and I think it's an amazing service for people out there that are just so stressed about what is happening now all the time. It's invaluable to get just these like really great tidbits of, like you said, you're not just shoving facts down people's throats. You're giving them a very human experience and different experiences that other people have had that are similar to learn from. I think that's such an amazing approach. We try and do the same thing here. We get into discussions about it. I don't want to just sit and read statistics on things, because that bores the crap out of me, you know?
Yeah, and you have such an amazing skill. I just wanted to thank you because I read Psychology of Money a couple years ago, and you have such an amazing skill of how approachable your writing is, to where it's not dry. You dig into story, and you make it so relatable. But I feel like it is a personal development, I almost dare to say, sort of like self-help betterment of oneself, and your vehicle just happens to be talking about money and finance, which, if we're all honest, is one of the biggest stressors that there is. So actually taking that approach and looking at, let's talk about all of this, but in a way where we can understand ourselves better to empower ourselves to make better choices. So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all three of you. This has been fun.
Oh, thank
Of
you.
course.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you, Morgan. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening. If anything in this episode resonated with you, please make sure that you go ahead and you share it with a loved one, you share it with a friend. This is information for everybody, and we'd love for you to share it around. And while you're at it, we would love for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, that follow button. That helps us more than you know. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Oldish. We adore you guys. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that you don't have to navigate life alone. If there's something hard that you're dealing with, or you're just ready for a change, then reach out to me at randyspelling.com, or you could DM me on Instagram, also at randyspelling. And if I can help you, I will. If there's a resource that I can share with you, I will also do that as well. Thanks.